decode it. He tells it as he knows it. His analysis is exceptional, accurate, and he's years ahead of most other financial analysts. Hi, Jim. Are you there?
I'm here. I'm ready and waiting. How you doing? Good to be on.
Oh, thank you so much for talking to me today. It is everything that's happening right now with Cyprus is so important, and people, it's chaos, and people really want to know what is happening and what it means for them. And I mean, it's a shocker. So what is going on?
Well, to answer what's going on with Cyprus, you really need about an hour, but let's try to make it quick here in a summary fashion. It was a flashpoint. It was a move of desperation by European bankers. This is a high-stakes game. I think there was some attempt to try to confiscate Russian money. There's some Russian money that moved out early, but there's a lot to the Russian money. It's not just one piece. This is about confiscation. This is about the risk of producing bank runs. It's a multifaceted, messy situation with some hidden angles that are really quite important. I believe this is the flashpoint that many gold analysts were expecting. It will cause an awakening, a shift of priorities, and some rather stern reactions. The high stakes, though, relate to the Russians. This is not just oligarch money, as the flimsy, shallow U.S. and Western press report. This is really instead a realignment and in desperation. The Russian energy firms, including Gazprom, are involved. It's an absolute mammoth, giant Russian natural gas company. They've got pipelines, LNG, all kinds of things going on. But with Gazprom, there's been a hidden movement away from the petrodollar. And it looks like maybe the Russians are wooing the Saudis into something. So maybe there was some kind of an attack on Cyprus by the Europeans with the Anglo-American loyalty. And I refer to Anglo-American a lot because the British and Americans are a tag team. Now, Russia uses Cyprus. This is not reported in the press. The Russians use it as an intermediary bank window to the entire Western banking system. So if Gazprom wants to make or accept a payment from a German firm, it goes to the hidden Cyprus bank account for this Russian giant firm. At one time, Russia might have had trillions in exposure, not 20 billion. That's another wrong figure that's put out by the press. If it's an intermediary function for the Russian banking system and the Russian energy firms and all their mafia stuff and the oligarchs with their hidden money, the oligarch money is not in Russia with a window in Cyprus. It's money that escaped 15 and 20 years ago and found a home in Cyprus. But if that's an intermediary bank window for the Russian entire banking system, we're not talking about 20 billion. We're talking about trillions. So, there's something that my best source, I call him The Voice. He's a great guy. He's a gold trader, European descent. He said that since last July, we're talking 9 months, an enormous amount of money and funds have been exiting Cyprus and finding home in Dubai, in the Persian Gulf, Hong Kong, and Singapore. He said there are mind-bending amounts of money. Okay, so a lot of Russian money moved out of Cyprus. Very, very big money. We're talking much more than 20 billion. We're probably talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. All right.
Well,
it's just massive. Sherry, it's just one more deceptive story.
Doesn't Gazprom have their own banks in Cyprus? Hello?
I lost you there for a second. Doesn't what?
Okay.
Back again. What in Cyprus? What?
Doesn't Gazprom have its own bank in Cyprus too?
Yeah, it's called Gazprom Bank. It's giant. It's gigantic. It's enormous. It's huge.
Okay.
So they probably use that for funding any Western contractors that might be involved in building, say, LNG facilities in Northern Europe or pipelines into Central Europe. Gazprom is enormous. They're all over the place. It's like ExxonMobil times 2.
And also, it was Russian government money too that's been in Cyprus banks. It's not just what they say, the black money, as you mentioned. As the media is trying to say, well, they deserve it, kind of thing. But I mean, we're talking about full Russian money that the EU was about to try to confiscate. Correct?
That's my understanding. I just made a short list of all the different elements of the Russian money. Sure, you got the Russian oligarchs like Boris B., who was recently murdered. They helped him in a hanging. There's the Russian government money, central bank actions. The central bank in Russia, they have functions across Europe because there's a lot of commerce between Russia and Europe. Then you have the Russian energy firms. They're doing just staggering build-outs in pipeline and infrastructure, LNG, you name it. Then you've got the Russian mafia that has not yet been mentioned in the press that I've heard. And then you've got another element that's kind of intermingled with the oligarchs, but really there's a division among them. It's the ex-KGB money.
Right.
Now, ex-KGB money has been folded into Putin business interests, like in the other giant energy firm, the oil company Rosneft. Rosneft, you're going to be hearing more about. It's now larger than ExxonMobil, but I bet you not 1% of Americans have even heard the word Rosneft.
I hadn't.
Yeah.
So obviously that is. Now, the Russians, it seems like the situation with Cyprus is very fluid. I mean, it seems to be changing every moment of information coming out about it. And it seems that the Russians were actually able, last week, through branches, not in Cyprus, but Bank of Cyprus branches, able to get their money out. And from my reading a little bit, it went to Latvia, which now the EU is threatened. So now, doesn't that put Cyprus in a situation where they're not going to get that, confiscate all that money after all? And what happens with this bail-in, as they were calling it, for Cyprus now, if they don't have the money from the depositors?
Yeah, well, the obvious conclusion is that it's just a matter of time before Cyprus abandons the euro. And my feeling is that the Russians are going to just wait and let them come to their own conclusion to abandon the euro. Yeah, it was a rather sneaky move, and I just learned it yesterday that Cyprus bank branches across Europe allowed a lot of backdoor, I call it backdoor movement. And that's all very nice. But, you've got these marginal European countries. There's one or two in Eastern Europe, and I'm just not a really great student on Eastern Europe these days. I'm much more focused on what's going on with the dollar and trade zone developments. But I don't think it's Poland, but maybe it's I'm not sure. I'm just going to say there's some other Eastern European countries, and I think they're going to change their mind about joining the euro, because what the European Monetary Union essentially means is, sure, come on down and forfeit your money. So right. That's not going to happen. But, Latvia is another story. These Baltic states, it's Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Latvia is in the process right now.
Hey, Jim, can we continue this on part 2, please?
Sure.
Let's continue on Latvia part 2. Okay, we were talking about Latvia.
Okay, Latvia, if they have their brain screwed on properly on their brain stem with the neck, they're probably going to change their mind about joining the euro, because some of the leaders might say, well, gee, if we join, will I lose 10% or 40% or all? of my bank account? I mean, to heck with the citizens of Latvia. What about my bank account? That's going to be the question that some of the Latvian officials make. But, well, okay, Latvia is not on my mind.
No.
What my mind is focusing on is Italy, Spain, France, Portugal, and Ireland.
One thing that I believe that should be mentioned, though, it's amazing that Cyprus, and I don't know if people really know this, but Cyprus, 2008, they joined the EU, and they were the most prosperous, healthy, financial country. They only had 30% of the deposits loaned out. You wanted to buy a house, you had to put 30% down. The Lehman Brothers and the whole collapsing of the banks did not affect them because they weren't in derivatives. All of a sudden, they joined the EU, and they're now crashed, and all they're going to be the first really desperate Greece is bad, but they're talking, first of taking the people's money directly out of the deposits. I think people need to know that about Cyprus. I think that's been the media.
It brings up a very weird question that I just came up with yesterday while discussing with somebody else and you, because we banged around a lot of things yesterday preliminarily. Could it be that Cyprus was invited into the EU so that they could perhaps target the Russian funds? And you mentioned that a lot of Cyprus bank branches across Europe received the funds. So mission accomplished, so to speak. If a lot of the Russian money is now in Europe and not in Cyprus, could that not have been the target? Could that not have been the motive? Right. But, that's all well and good and could be a very valid point. But I like to focus, again, on Italy, Spain, France, Portugal, and Ireland. Now, you combine their populations and you come up with just some round figures, 180 million people. 180 million people. That's a lot of bank accounts to be pulled out of fear for what they're seeing in Cyprus.
Right.
180 million people. Now, Cyprus, what does it have? 2 or 3 million? I don't know exactly, but I'd be surprised if it's more than 2 or 3 million.
I think they said 1 million is the population there.
Okay, well, fine. Greece has a robust, I think, 9 or 10 or 11 million?
Yeah.
All right. Those 5 nations I cited, 180 million people. That's a potential for a lot of bank runs. That's what I'm expecting, and that's what my best source of information, who has really good ties to Germany and Switzerland, that's what he expects to happen. So with the bank runs, let me back up a second. What was Cyprus? Okay, it was a nasty event, but if you look at some of the terminology and some of the anatomy of crises, you'd call it a flashpoint. Okay, a lit fuse, a point where the fire begins, a punch in the gut. That was the original event, the flashpoint. A flashpoint doesn't guarantee a full-blown contagion and crisis. But you might get one. What you need next for that, and I'm not saying I want it, I'm saying I expect it. And that's a big difference that I have with some family discussions, brother, sister, father, even mother when she was alive. Jim, it sounds like you want this. I said, no, I would like to have good, correct analysis. I'm expecting it. So I'll be surprised if we don't get it. And if we do get it, it'll be disastrous. I'll have mixed emotions that the ugliness is with us, but it's a correct forecast, and I gave people some correct, good warning for them to move their money and not get slaughtered. So what's coming is the tipping point. The tipping point is where you've got the guy standing, and now suddenly he's not standing anymore. He tipped over. The bank runs in Southern Europe plus Ireland, I think, are going to be the flashpoint, Sherry.
And
it's going to make a lot of people, it's going to make a lot of people wake up to what's a better idea. And I think that idea is the Iceland solution.
Right. But where are people with the bank runs? I mean, especially with the EU announcing this is the template, the president of the EU yesterday saying that, and then today they're saying that they're going to do the depositor bail-ins throughout Europe. People should be running and taking their money out of the bank right now. Where are they putting it? Because it's funny, it doesn't look like they're putting it in gold right now. Gold's down $8 today.
Well, I don't really regard the price that you quoted from COMEX as being relevant. And this is where I break ranks with a lot of people in the gold community. If you were to ask me, hey, Jim, in the last month, how many times have you checked the gold price? I would honestly tell you, I don't know, last month, maybe 3 or 4 times. That's because it's not the gold price. It's the corrupted COMEX price for futures contracts related to gold, which they do not have. So if you say that there's not a whole lot of gold being purchased with coins in Southern Europe in reaction to Cyprus, I would disagree totally and say that they are, and they're taking advantage of the corrupt lower artificial price. Now, my best gold source of information is a trader, not a traitor, a trader. He makes trades. He's a great guy. He has clients in China, Persian Gulf, Central Europe, Hong Kong, Australia, United States, but not too many in the United States because he's trying to move away from the fascist dictatorship. He told me a month ago, he said, don't pay a lot of attention to the gold price. I said, I don't. I hardly ever look at it anymore. I don't even make price charts in my newsletter because it doesn't mean a damn thing. I asked him, what are you seeing as the gold price? And he gave me a crystal clear answer. He said, in many parts of the world, such as Asia and the Persian Gulf, if you want a large volume, which means a few tons or more of gold authenticated, you need to pay $2,000 an ounce. And I said, well, we're talking $1,600 here for the COMEX price. He said, yes, the divergence, Jim, that you referred to a few years ago in 09 and 10 and 11, the divergence is here. You got a 20% gap between many parts of the world and the corrupted London, New York price. All right, so enough of that. There is reaction. The people are reacting. I think they're moving money out of their bank accounts in Southern Europe, but there's another phenomenon that's really quite nasty going on, and that is extreme recession and depression.
Right.
So they're moving money out so they can probably have it, let's just say, Miguel in Spain moved out, $6,000 in the last week and a half in reaction to this, and he's hiding it in a box in his basement in Madrid because he knows he's going to need it in the next 3 or 4 months. Okay, that's not a gold coin purchase. Maybe other friends of his are going to be pulling out $25,000 and buying 3 more gold coins, but also putting money in a box in a basement for the next 3 or 4 months. These people are trying to prepare for depression and shortages and all kinds of things. No, I think these bank runs, though, are going to make the governments react and say, what can we do to stop our people from these bank runs? And that's where the Iceland solution comes in.
Right.
Let's get into that, okay?
Okay. Hey, Jim, let's get in that in the next section, please. Hold on one moment. Okay, Jim, let's thank you for that. So talk about the Iceland solution. Let's it'd be great if Cyprus would do the Iceland solution, and everybody starts saying no. Iceland, the president took and he jailed the bankers. And everybody, it's prospering now. And so it seems like, instead of going Greece, talk to me about that. Talk to me why, and hopefully Cyprus will end up going Iceland.
Okay, it's really interesting. Iceland, when that happened, I think it was 2.5 years ago. I don't know exactly, but about that time, I kind of chuckled and thought, oh, this is a nice solution. Don't expect this to happen widely across Europe. And why not? Iceland is small. But Iceland had a distinction. A lot of British pension money was sitting in Iceland. So the resentment by Britain, I thought, was going to bring about MI6 events like what you saw in Oslo, Norway in 2011, when supposedly some guy became a mad bomber, when if you looked closely and followed the trails, you'd see British intelligence. So the U.S. and England are involved in terrorism to try to protect the money. That's what I thought was going to happen in Iceland, but it didn't. I'd like to answer the Iceland question with a little bit of a preface regarding Russia.
Okay.
I thought Russia was going to push Cyprus quickly into abandoning the euro.
Right.
Sure, we'll help you out. We'll help your two main banks, but we'd like your offshore natural gas fields. Let's bring that into the Gazprom giant Russian firm. Let's bring it into the Gazprom fold. But, we'd like some other commitments for you. We'd also maybe like that naval port that Germany has.
Right.
Force them into abandoning it. And we want you to abandon the euro and say F you to those guys. But, it's not that simple. My guess is that Russia moved out a lot of its important money and didn't have to make a decision so quickly. So they left. I think the Russians allowed the oligarchs to be trapped, and maybe some of the oligarch money was trapped, but maybe some of it got out. I don't know. I don't have all the ins and outs. We're going to find out in the next month or so what really happened there. Okay, I got this as a confirmation from The Voice. My buddy, the Central European gold trader, he and I were in complete agreement. Someone asked me, what do you think the Russians are going to do? And I laid out in just a few lines what I thought the Russians were going to do. And The Voice responded, spot on, Jim. And he's fluent in Russian, by the way. And he knows personally at least a couple of the oligarchs because he spent 10 years in Russia and is fluent in Russian. In the 1990 decade he was there. All right. I said Russia will permit the island nation of Cyprus to rot and fester under the EU whips and chains. Then Russia will re-enter after the Cyprus solution comes, and they will then see the decision to abandon the euro. At that time, and only after more pain for Cyprus, for continuing to negotiate and cut deals with the European bankers against the wishes of the Cypriot people, only then will come discussion of an Iceland solution in Cyprus, which will push Cyprus into the eastern sphere, eastern fold. Because I believe one of the incredibly powerful elements of Cyprus that's not anywhere in the press is that it is part of the tipping point. Watch Cyprus tip and turn toward the east with Russia and China, and watch them hand over their offshore gas fields to Gazprom later, not now. Everybody seems to think that, well, you got to make a decision now. No, you don't. You don't. And Russia's going to let Cyprus rot, fester, and feel pain. And then a very interesting angle is going to come into this because Israel has extensive claims to the Cyprus offshore natural gas fields.
Oh, okay. Now,
boy. And it's getting just so dangerous. So that's my view. And the Iceland solution basically does the same thing as Iceland did, obviously. But they say maybe not the bankers go into jail, but maybe the bankers are thrown off the island, and we're going to default on the giant loans that we've got to the big European banks. And that is the tipping point on the financial side. We got the trade side where they turn to Russia and China in the east, but the banking side would be, no, we're going to default and we're going to let that big bank, I'll just say a big Italian bank is at risk, and boom, it goes bust. And bang, a French bank goes bust. And bang, a London bank goes bust. Then a week passes, and then bang, a big U.S. bank goes bust. And what was the start of it? The tipping point of Cyprus deciding to default on those bank loans. I think it's coming. It's not going to be today or tomorrow. I think it's coming. It's probably going to happen before the summer is too far along. Now, there's something else regarding this tipping point, and it has to do with other nations announcing that they're going to impose their own bank account taxes, and they're going to call it whatever they want. They're going to give them clever names, like the Spanish are doing the same thing right now. They're working something through their own Senate. And it's very clever. I read the details of it, and here's how they word it. We're going to impose a bank account tax, but only on the regions that aren't following our orders for other taxation measures. In other words, we're going to whack Catalonia. So they're going to impose bank account taxes only on the renegade territories and regions and provinces. I don't know. I think they call them provinces and not states in Spain. All right. Then you've got New Zealand that's coming out with a lot more direct statement. Right. If a bank fails, we will seize a portion of depositor accounts in order to process the reinstatement of the bank and the solution and putting the bank on firm footing. All right, so a bank bailout in New Zealand is going to incorporate account seizures. What they're doing here, Sherry, is they are absolutely refusing, by not going to the Iceland solution, they are refusing defaults on loans, and they are refusing liquidation of banks. I have said this now for three and a half years. The U.S. and England refuses to do a solution. They're not even attempting solutions because they refuse to liquidate the big banks where the political power lies. Unless and until these big banks are liquidated, there will be no solution to the crisis, and the United States will fall into a very dark place that later will be determined and given a name, Third World. So unless these banks are liquidated and the big bank loans are defaulted on, you're not going to get any solution. The Iceland solution is the only solution. If you don't do that, you're going to see the U.S., Canada, and England, and I'll get to England in a minute, moving into a firm place called the Third World, isolated from the rest of the trade zones, and it's pretty much going to be China and Russia and their corridor creating the Eurasian trade zone. But the U.S. and Canada and London, England, they're going to be at risk of being stuck and isolated. And in that situation of stuck and isolated, they're going to have to bid down their currencies in order to be supplied. How many years ago was it that the U.S. boasted that, yeah, we import a lot, but we're a strong financial center, envy of the world?
Right. And Jim, I have a question on the next section about what you've just spoken about. Okay, so let me ask you that on the next section.
Okay.
Jim, you were mentioning pretty much the Russian and Chinese, and what the EU is doing, and the Icelandic solution. It's kind of sounded to me like this is actually World War III going on, but on a financial basis, and not using guns, and we're not seeing the feet on the ground, but it's actually a financial World War III happening between East and West. Am I pretty much correct?
Yeah, well, I think we've got both. We certainly have the financial war, and just in respect to the financial war, back in early 2011, I changed the name of one of my two main hat-trick letter report.
I've lost you. Go ahead.
Okay. In respect to the financial wars that were going on, back in 2011, early in the year, I actually changed the name of one of my two hat-trick letter reports. It was called before the macroeconomic report. And in that report, I would forecast and make my arguments with good, strong analytic points that the U.S. banking system was going to approach insolvency and bust. and the U.S. economy was going to approach a recession that it can't get out of, heading towards systemic failure. And the U.S. housing market was going to go bust and be stuck in a recession for multiple years. And the whole thing was going to cave in for the United States, threatening it for the third world with a systemic failure with the climax of the U.S. Treasury bond default, U.S. debt default. All right, I changed the name in early 11 to the Money War Report. Money War. It's a war. It's a war for what? To defend the dollar and the fiat currency system. To defend the British pound, the dollar, the euro, and the Swiss franc and its system, managed by the central banks and taken great exploit advantage by the central banks. They print money for themselves. I would like the privilege of printing money so I could go out and buy a car.
Yeah.
Let me just hey, can I buy a house? I need a little bit more money printed. Can you just whip it up? That's what's going on. The United States wants to retain its privilege to print money and pay its bills, to print money and pay for its war, to print money and pay for its underground cities.
Yeah.
To print money and pay for its underground train between Denver and Langley, Virginia. There is, though, a hot war, which is the term given for a military war with soldiers and shots fired and artillery. There is a war, and this may come as a surprise to a lot of your listeners, but the war is taking place, and it's related to the financial war because it's the resource war, and it's taking place in Africa.
Right.
In particular, it's southern Africa, but gee, it looks like Mali toward the north, I think they're just south of Libya in that northwest corner. Mali is now the subject, the site, the target of a British and French invasion. And, you can do some simple math, and the promise of France and England returning Germany's gold over the next 7 years, the volume is exactly the same as the Mali gold output in the next 7 years. But, back to southern Africa, it's in particular the Congo and neighboring countries. But I got word from a military contact who's a subscriber. And, I've got a lot of contact. One thing I didn't expect with this newsletter is just tons and tons of contacts. A lady in Hawaii with a friend who is an air traffic controller in Washington, D.C., and, had to sign some loyalty oath so that she wouldn't reveal all the movement of U.S. Air Force over to take, just a lot of stuff. Anyway, there's so much going on, but this military guy said, you've got U.S. soldiers coming back from Djibouti, which is on the Horn of Africa next to Kenya, nearby Congo, but not neighboring. They're going back to Washington, D.C. They're going back to Virginia to get their wounds treated. They're being subjected to armed conflict against Chinese troops.
Really? Well,
The war is hot in southern Africa, not Union of South Africa, in the southern nations of Africa, in particular Djibouti, to control the Horn of Africa, and Congo, the Republic of Congo, to control the gigantic metals and diamonds smuggling trade.
Well, the president of China is right now, he was in Tanzania yesterday, and he's going to the Congo. So yes, they're definitely, Africa is very important. Now, I want to go back. What do you think? Let's go back to Cyprus, because we can just go on about China and Africa. That's another whole subject. But what do you think with the hidden motives behind the EU decisions to start with Cyprus, to start taking the depositors' money, and basically it was Russian money? And what do you think I'm kind of putting two questions in one here, of the retaliation that can be expected from Russia to the EU in the way of that world war of financial going on?
This is where it gets really seedy, ugly, and confusing, and I don't know, scummy is just not a good enough word. But about a month ago, a large heroin shipment, narcotics, was seized by the Russians inside Afghanistan. My guess is that it had a probable destination of Russian lands, and no question in my mind, all you got to do is check with military people, security people. Afghanistan is all about narcotics and heroin.
Right.
It's a vertically integrated system. They've got transport trucks for processing chemicals that are involved in changing the poppy output and the tar into raw heroin. They got distribution routes. They send it through Kosovo. They got the Iraqi Export Bank managed by J.P. Morgan. That's a clearinghouse for funds. All right, so the Russians were pissed off. They're sick of heroin coming from U.S. sources in Afghanistan, so they seized it. Okay, big loss. The Western press portrayed it as a loss to the Taliban's. No, it was a loss to the Wall Street banks.
The CIA. Yep.
Well, yeah, whatever, but they moved it through the Wall Street banks, which would have collapsed 4 years ago without narco money. All right, then another event happened also about a month ago. The Kremlin in Russia announced a ban on opening new Western bank offices inside all of Russia. Well, that's not going to go over with Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan and Citigroup. They like to expand their influence. All right, so there might have been an implied motive as a protective firewall against the Western central bank inflation spew. The Russians just wanted to wall it off. And maybe the Russians have been making some moves. You heard my comment before, a tremendous amount, multiple hundreds of, maybe hundreds of billions, a few $100 billion have moved to Dubai, Hong Kong, and Singapore from Cyprus in the last 9 months. Okay, so maybe there was a motive by the Europeans to say, let's try to trap as much money in Cyprus as we can. We're running out of time. But the Russians might have another hidden motive. They want the Gazprom influence to take over the gas fields off Cyprus. They're really quite large. It's the gas field. I saw a map. It looked like it was 3 times the landmass of Cyprus itself.
Yeah, it is.
Also, the Russians might want the Germans to abandon their naval port in Cyprus. It wouldn't take much, 30 days notice, and the Germans would be out. And that's a nice naval port. It's on the eastern end of the Mediterranean where Turkey and some of the Bosporus straits are. And, hey, the Russians would love that. That would go very nicely to match up their Syrian naval port at Tartus. But the retaliation, I think the retaliation is going to be in overt ways and hidden covert ways. It's going to be complicated. Already,
I wanted you to continue about the retaliation, and there's one other question after that on the next segment, please.
Okay.
Jim, you were talking about the retaliation of Russia and what they may do.
It's going to be in some obvious, visible ways, but there are going to be a number of hidden, vicious, nasty things going on. Because the Russians, let's face it, I mean, the voice, he's got some Russian contacts, and he said, you screw around, he used some rather salty talk, but you screw around with the Russians, and they don't just get their vengeance, they cut your head off.
And are you still there?
Medvedev, who's, by the way, formerly CEO.
Hold on, we're cutting off. Hold on. Okay, go ahead. We got cut off.
Okay. The Prime Minister Medvedev, who, by the way, had a former position as the head of Gazprom, so you can see how tightly linked the energy giant firms are with the Kremlin political structure. Medvedev had a response. Now, it came ironically on a stage where Barroso, an EU commissioner, was on the stage also. And he called it disgusting, shocking, insulting. He had a number of expletives for the manner in which the European bankers conducted this whole crisis management. And in his next breath, Medvedev mentioned a clear plan to dump European-based reserves, euro-based reserves, the euro bonds.
Right.
From the distrust, from the decline, and from, no safe haven for European money. Okay. Any mention of diversification of Russian reserves, in my opinion, is clear language for gold purchase. Now, bear in mind that the Russians do not give accurate data for their official gold purchases or their official gold reserve holdings. Again, The Voice, who has contacts in Russia, assures me they have entire tunnels under the Kremlin, acres that are filled with gold. He says their official gold holdings are greater than what the U.S. had at Fort Knox before the Clinton and Rubin gangsters stole it all. Okay, the Russian gold purchases, they're going to be done by the Kremlin. They're going to be done by the Central Bank of Russia. They're going to be done by the oligarchs. They're going to be done by the Russian mafia. They're going to be done by all the different Russian parties that we've mentioned, because none of them feels as though their money is safe in Europe anymore. They're neighbors to Europe. They're not neighbors to the United States. Europe is their big trade partner. And maybe they're going to start, this is this is like the big wild card. Maybe the Russians are going to start working a lot more closely with China in gold purchases, in working the arbitrage with the Shanghai Metals Exchange that already has a $20 to $30 difference, a spread they call it, that's higher than the London posted price. So,
and that's the exchange price.
That's the exchange price in Shanghai, where you can get your sales, and you sell it at the higher price and you buy it at the lower price. So if London and New York want to keep their price low, okay, we're going to buy your gold in London, we're going to ship it and sell it in Shanghai. It's called arbitrage. And usually it forces a gap much wider. So the 20 to 25 gap that we saw earlier is now 30. And in a few months it'll be 40. And a few months after that it'll be 50 and 60. And then before you know it, you're going to hear, well, we got a gold bullion shortage problem in London. It's because the arbitrage drained it.
Isn't it pretty much drained anyway, and it's pretty much paper that they're manipulating? I mean, look at ABN AMRO. As of April 1st, you can still buy gold from them, but you can never get physical.
Well, that's the Netherlands.
Yeah.
That's not London. London is a lot bigger than what you might think, and London has got two real big friends. The Roman catacombs. I don't like mentioning the name of the place, the Holy See, beginning with a V.
Right.
The Roman catacombs are filled with gold, and that gold has some very tight relationships with the U.S. security agencies for processing and diversifying their narco money. So narco money has been converted to Roman catacomb gold. Swallow that, listeners. London also has rather tight relations with Switzerland. It's called the Bank for International Settlements. I won't get into their long established historical background, but there's a syndicate involved, and it's ugly. So when London reaches the bottom of their gold barrel, the Bank of England makes phone calls to Rome and Switzerland. And in a matter of days, a plane unloads tonnage of gold. So anyone who claims that London is running out of gold must incorporate their ability to replenish from their buddies in Rome and Switzerland.
Right, and probably the Queen went through it a couple of months ago, right after it was replenished. We have a few more minutes, and I really appreciate your time. There's something that I don't quite understand that you know about, and I would love for you to tell the listeners about. The Eurasian Trade Zone. I've been hearing about that. What is that, and what is the meaning for everybody? How would it affect them?
Well, Asia wants to band together. Asia wants to bring in parts of Europe. Asia wants to bring in India and Russia, the two big BRIC prizes. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and now South Africa. They're calling them BRICS nations, B-R-I-C-S. What they want to do is establish a trade zone. They want to relax rules on tariffs, inspections. They want to ease the process of making payments for the transactions. They want economic development. They want it to make a low-cost trade zone. Every instance in modern history that's established where they have established a trade zone, there's been economic prosperity. And in the last 20 years, everywhere the United States has gotten their nose into and their fingers into, it's been the opposite of trade development. It's been strictures that have been inhibiting economic development. All right, a trade zone is being formed with the Eastern players, and, they will include Japan and South Korea and the Pacific Rim. They're already considering China to be their most important trade partner, if not their most high volume in trade. So, a lot of big changes are taking place. I got to mention something that the Obama administration proposed a couple of years ago and tried to get some progress on. It's called the Trans-Pacific something or other for effing morons. It's a trade zone for effing moron nations in Asia that want to exclude China.
As if anybody would do that.
Proposal. This is what the American people are getting for their dimes and their votes. Well, I don't even want to get into the corrupted votes for Obama, but, you've got leadership in the United States that tried to establish a trade zone with pressure tactics that no one wanted to listen to because it excluded China.
Right.
What morons are in charge?
Hey, Jim,
okay.
I want to thank you, and I know because I appreciate this interview and getting people informed. How can, and I'm sorry we're kind of out of time here, how can everybody keep up with what's going on and what you write about, the hat trick letter?
Right. Last thing I'll say on the trade zone is real quick. The Russians and Chinese will be the core, the axis of this, and they will exclude the United States, and they will incorporate England only if they cooperate in excluding the United States. Only if London cooperates in using treasury bonds to shove them back down the London and U.S. banker throats. All right. I do 2 newsletters. My website is goldenjackass.com. The hat trick letter consists of the Money War Report and the Golden Currency Report. Come to my website, look at the free elements of it. I've got a lot of public articles. I got a lot of public free interviews like this. A lot are cited. It goes back a couple of years in the citations. Take a look at it, learn from it, read up a little bit, get your interest, and then sign up for my newsletter because my public articles contain about 1/4 of what I deal with.
Jim, thank you so much. Your information is so amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I encourage everyone to go to thegoldenjackass.com and subscribe to Jim because his newsletters are so informative, and you don't read about this anywhere else. And so, Jim, thank you again, and have an awesome day, and I look forward to doing this again with you.
Maybe we'll do it again very soon, and in the meantime, I just want you